Chapter 826 Yamada Masanami. Zhang Yi laughed. He wouldn't eat the pre-made dishes here. It wasn't that he was picky, it was just that he had plenty of delicious food in his space, so there was no need to eat this kind of stuff. Even the rich flavor of the dishes was not sure how much technology and hard work had been added. Zhang Yi wanted to leave, but when he saw Lu Jingnan's fawning and pleasing face, he felt a little familiar for some reason. He didn't think much about it at first, but his eyes inadvertently glanced at the pile of pre-made dishes in the cage drawer. In an instant, some memories surfaced in Zhang Yi's mind. He smiled and asked, "What's your name?" Lu Jingnan froze for a moment, not knowing why Zhang Yi asked him the name of this small person on the ship. "My name is Lu Jingnan, just a cook." Zhang Yi's brows frowned slightly. "Lu Jingnan? Where was your hometown before? I see that you are quite skilled in cooking. What cuisine do you specialize in?" Once asked about this topic, Lu Jingnan suddenly stammered. After several seconds, only then replied, "My hometown was in that Guangdong East. I can cook a little bit of Cantonese cuisine." Then say a couple Cantonese words to hear. Lu Jingnan swallowed a mouthful of saliva, the top of his head was already sweating coldly. "Steel pot," with tears shouting to repair the scooped pot. Zhang Yi's mouth, the smile slowly expanded, but the smile was cold, as if he was teasingly looking at a prey. "You don't seem to be from Guangdong East. No, I should say you don't seem to be from Huaxu Kingdom." At this moment, the 4 crew members around them also noticed that something was wrong. "Captain, is there something wrong with this person's identity?" Chef Xia Changming hurried over and kicked Lu Jingnan directly onto the ground. "MD, what the hell were you, old thing, daring to impersonate a Chinese descendant?" Lu Jingnan forced himself to endure the pain on his stomach and denied, "I was indeed of Chinese descent. I just left my hometown for too long, and I don't speak my hometown language very well." Zhang Yi stared at him and said with narrowed eyes, "But your Mandarin is very good." Lu Jingnan still wanted to explain something. Zhang Yi directly interrupted him coldly, "Don't pretend with me, President Yamada." At this moment, Zhang Yi had thoroughly remembered who this person in front of him was. The president of Neon Yamada Corporation, Yamada Masanami. Yamada Corporation had a branch in Tianhai City in the first place, and their warehouse was not far from where Zhang Yi was working. Some neon companies had the habit of printing the president's head on their products or transportation vehicles. That was why Zhang Yi thought Yamada Masanami looked familiar. The few crew members around him sniffed, and fire sprang out of their eyes. "Neon! Damn you, how dare you pretend to be from Huaxu Kingdom, dog thing, die for me." A few people rushed up and shone Yamada Masanami with punches and kicks. Their strikes were unrelenting, they were all aimed at the hard places. Yamada Masanami wailed in pain. "Don't fight, don't fight. I was a spiritual Huaxu Kingdom person. My great-grandfather was from Guangdong East, I have Huaxu Kingdom blood." But these words only ushered in Zhang Yi's cold laughter and the crew's angry curses. "Dog, you're still a bastard's thing, that's even more deserving." The people of Jiangnan region's hostility towards the Neon people was at an all-time high at this time. This was because not long ago, the Ronin landed and produced killings in 7 or 8 cities in Jiangnan one after another. The number of deaths directly and indirectly caused amounted to tens of thousands. In today's Jiangnan region, no one who mentioned the word neon was not gnashing their teeth. Zhang Yi sat on a chair and quietly closed his eyes, enjoying the sound of Yamada Masanami's wailing. He found the sound wonderful. Although he had taken out Eclipse Moon in the first place, just killing a dozen or so Eclipse Moon members did not make him feel good. Why was it that they could run to the land of Jiangnan and kill so many people of Huaxu Kingdom, while Zhang Yi and the others could only kill a dozen or so culprits? This matter was not fair, and it could not be ended so easily. Now that this old boy Yamada Masanami had appeared on his ship, the result was naturally predictable. Of the 4 crew members, Chef Xia Changming fought the hardest. Because the person was selected by him, he had to make a statement or else it might cause Zhang Yi to be displeased with him. Yamada Masanami was still arguing at first, claiming that he was not a neon, but he was soon knocked out of his 8 teeth and was too painful to speak. The floor was covered in blood, and Yamada Masanami was left gasping for air. Chef Xia Changming picked up a boning sword from the cutting board and was about to finish him off. Zhang Yi, however, stopped him. "What do you want?" Chef Xia Changming froze for a moment, then said angrily, "Of course it was to fend him off. What's the point of keeping this kind of dog?" Zhang Yi looked at the sword in his hand. "That was a guy for cooking, don't use it to kill pigs." A look of hope flashed in Yamada Masanami's eyes as he looked at Zhang Yi pleadingly. Zhang Yi, however, smiled cruelly. "Besides, wouldn't it be too cheap to die like this?" Yamada Masanami's body trembled violently as he wondered what Zhang Yi was going to do to him. Although I was of Neon nationality, I haven't harmed any Huashu Kingdom people." Yamada Masanami cried out in pain. Zhang Yi turned a deaf ear as his gaze looked out the window, the vast icy sea chilled to the bone. "Throw it down and feed it to the sharks." At this temperature, throwing it into the sea would freeze into ice in less than a few seconds, and it was clean and hygienic, making it a great choice. A few crew members got Zhang Yi's order and immediately set up Yamada Masanami like a dead pig, dragging him towards the deck. However, they had just gone out when they saw Su Nuanchi rushing over with Zhu Lark, blocking their way. Zhu Lark's pupils shrunk when she saw Yamada Masanami's miserable state. "What were you guys doing? Why are you treating an innocent person like this?" And Su Nuanchi even cried out, "Mr. Yamada." Then she jumped in front of Yamada Masanami and wailed in heartache. Chef Xia Changming was helpless. "Miss Zhu, this guy was a Neon. The captain told us to throw him into the sea to feed the sharks." Zhu Lark coldly grimaced, anger blazing in her eyes. "This was simply the devil's way for you guys." Zhang Yi walked out from the kitchen, and as soon as he saw Zhu Lark and Su Nuanchi, he realized that the sound of Yamada Masanami's pig-killing screams just now was too loud and drew the others over. However, he was indifferent as all. Zhang Yi's careless look annoyed Zhu Lark and Su Nuanchi. Su Nuanchi cried and pointed at Zhang Yi angrily, "Surname Zhang Yi, you're too cruel. Mr. Yamada has been helping us cook, he was the one who helped us prepare food on Rock Flow Island. And he was like a father to me, caring for me in every way. How could you do such a thing to him so unquestioningly? You are simply not human, you are a beast." Chapter 827, You Don't Understand the Cruelty of the End Times. Su Nuanchi was out of her mind with anger. She couldn't tolerate Zhang Yi treating the person she admired so badly. Zhang Yi glanced at her. "Slap your mouth. He didn't have any unnecessary nonsense with this kind of woman." A crew member got the order and immediately walked over, slapping Su Nuanchi hard on her face. Directly hitting her, half of her delicate little face bulged high, and several of her teeth fell out. Zhu Lark's face changed as she raised her voice and said, "Mr. Zhang, you've gone too far." She stared at Zhang Yi, clenched her fists and took a deep breath. "I can understand your feelings, even if he was a Neon, you shouldn't treat him like this. There's a right to be wronged, and not every Neon is evil. If you do this, how are you different from those vicious Ronin?" The commotion here was so loud that it quickly drew the rest of the ship over. And that included the Rock Flow group on the middle deck and the Huashu Kingdom people and expatriates in the lower cabins. They didn't know what was going on, and only saw Yamada Masanami beaten like a dead dog, covered in blood and covered in bruises and purple. The petite and pitiful Su Nuanchi was knocked to the ground, rustling miserably with tears. All of a sudden, everyone stared at Zhang Yi with a strange look in their eyes. Although they feared Zhang Yi's power and the gun in his hand. But as residents of the lower and middle class of the cabin, they instinctively decided that Zhang Yi was the bad guy. People always had their asses determine their heads. Zhang Yi hadn't had time to speak to Zhu Lark. Li Zongyu, the leader of the Rock Flow group, came over in a huff. His expression was trying to be as stoic and restrained as possible, but he could not suppress the anger in his eyes. He stood in front of Zhang Yi, blocking between Zhang Yi and Su Nuanchi in the process. "Mr. Zhang, you promised me that you would protect the lives of everyone on our team. In this matter, I hope you can give us a reasonable explanation." With Li Zhongyu taking the lead, the residents of the lower and middle classes were emboldened. Right, how can you just beat someone up? You practically beat him to death. Rock Flow Group's Xia Yunfan shouted. Bayamo drew a cross on his chest. My God, this is just too cruel. He's so old, he'll die. When the crowd heard this, they looked at Yamada Masanami with more and more compassion, while looking at Zhang Yi with more indignation. Li Zhongyu's girlfriend, Zhang Weiwei, who was a surgeon, bravely walked over to check Yamada Masanami's injuries. Zhang Yi stuck his hands in his pockets and glanced around. The ship, from Zhu Lark on down, surprisingly showed hostility towards him if anything. This made Zhang Yi feel somewhat amused. I'm just going to throw him into the sea, what's the problem? Zhang Yi asked the crowd with a big smile. Li Zhongyu was a bit incredulous and asked rhetorically, just because he was a neon, you're doing this to him? Mr. Zhang, what era is this? Why do you still have such racist thoughts? This is horrible. Shou Kir walked next to Zhang Yi and silently supported him. To Zhang Yi, other attitudes did not matter in the slightest. On this ship, he had never cared about anyone other than Shou Kir either. That's right, just because he was a neon. That's why he must roll off my ship today. He spread his hands with a smile on his face. Oi oi oi, you guys don't look at me with such strange eyes. Am I not a good enough reason for this? Of course not. Su Nuanchi struggled to get up from the ground, tearfully pointing at Zhang Yi in accusation. Your kind of thinking is simply horrible. Killing someone because of another person's nationality is worse than the devil. Bayamo and the others were also of foreign nationality, as well as grounded foreigners. They were filled with worry. If Zhang Yi used this excuse to kill Yamada Masanami, what should they do? How should their lives be safeguarded? Zhang Yi reached out and pointed at Su Nuanchi's nose, but his gaze went to Li Zhongyu, Zhang Weiwei and the others. It seems like all of you have been living quite happily on Rock Flow Island these past half a year. So intent on caring about other people's deaths and lives. How nice. Zhang Weiwei frowned as she felt that Zhang Yi was just being shady. So she raised her head and righteously said to Zhang Yi, please, you don't have to taunt us with such a tone, we haven't had an easy life. Of course, we thank you for bringing us back to Huashu Kingdom. But this is no reason for you to kill at will. The others nodded approvingly in support of Zhang Weiwei's point of view. Zhang Yi, however, laughed. You think I was being shady and was joking with you? Zhang Weiwei did not respond, but her silence expressed her attitude. Scoff. Zhang Yi laughed disdainfully. So yeah, you guys don't know anything at all. Just boasting with me here. He glanced at Old Tian and suddenly shouted, Old Tian. Tell them what has been happening on the earth in the Jiangnan region for the past half a year. Old Tian said in a loud voice, was. He stepped in front of the crowd and glanced coldly past the group of dignitaries before saying in a loud voice, in the past 6 months, the number of deaths in the entire Jiangnan region was as high as 190 million. The percentage of dead population is 92.79%. Tianhai City's death population is over 20 million, with less than 20,000 survivors. These figures left all the people at the scene stunned. After they boarded the ship, Zhang Yi and the crew hadn't communicated with them much. So no one knew how the world outside really was. However, at this moment, after listening to Old Tian, they actually felt chills running down their backs. The world outside was surprisingly more brutal than Rock Flow Island. Xia Yunfan argued, but what does the deaths caused by natural disasters have to do with your indiscriminate killing of innocents? Old Tian gave him a cold look, the killing intent in his eyes causing Xia Yunfan to take 2 steps back. 20% of these deaths were indirectly caused by the apocalyptic natural disaster and directly caused by human hands. He took a deep breath. In July of this year, Neon's Ronin began to land in Linhai City, slaughtering more than 3,000 residents within Linhai City in less than 10 days. They later roamed across 8 cities including Jiangning, Huazhou, and Weining. The number of direct and indirect deaths due to them is as high as over 20,000. As soon as these words came out, the attitude of a portion of the Huashu Kingdom people at the scene changed. bears of rage emerged from their eyes. The national hatred and family feud with Neon could be said to be a world feud. With history far away, the memories of what had long since blurred in many people's minds. No one was willing to hold on to hatred for the rest of their lives. But who would have thought that those thieving bastards would once again attack Huashu Kingdom? And it led to the tragic deaths of tens of thousands of compatriots. Damned little Neon, really damned. These people were simply animals. It's the end of the world, everyone is struggling painfully on the death line. How dare they go and add insult to injury, wreaking havoc on the people of my Huashu Kingdom. Chapter 828, There Was More Than You Know. After knowing the reason why Zhang Yi had taught Yamada Masanami a lesson, more than half of the people at the scene had immediately changed their minds. The mindset of most of the countrymen was simple. They didn't want to go into too many axioms, but they understood in their hearts that there was revenge, and there was revenge. Even Li Zhongyu and Zhang Weiwei couldn't say anything else. National hatred and family feuds were justifiable. But Li Zhongyu still said to Zhang Yi, I can understand your feelings, but Mr. Yamada, he was innocent. He helped us a lot on Rockflow Island, can you spare his life? Seeing this, Julark also came up to persuade Zhang Yi, saying, you can't kill a group of people with one shot. It's not good to do so, and it will make people think that you are narrow-minded. She came up to Zhang Yi and glanced at the Rockflow group people and said to him, not to mention that there are so many foreigners and expatriates on this ship, if you do this, it will make them fearful and not conducive to unity. Su Nuanqi wiped her tears and touched her high, bulging cheeks, glaring angrily at Zhang Yi, her eyes filled with hateful anger. If you dare to do something to Mr. Yamada, I was absolutely not going to agree. Seeing so many people speaking for him, Yamada Masanami's face revealed a hopeful glow. Everyone, thank you a million times over. Zhang Yi laughed coldly. Spare him? Who am I to spare him? He walked over and pointed at Yamada Masanami's head and asked, and how much do you guys know about him? Su Nuanqi couldn't wait to say, Mr. Yamada was a good man. I can testify to that, all of us in the group can testify to that. Li Zhongyu also said to Zhang Yi, Mr. Yamada did treat us well when he was on the island. Nice, what a nice. Zhang Yi sneered as he paced the deck, his eyes filled with playfulness as he looked down at Yamada Masanami on the ground. This world is marvelous, the more villains you are, the more you like to disguise yourself as a good person in front of people. I bet when you were in Neon, you used to go to temples and donate money, or even give donations to charitable organizations to help the poor. Right? Su Nuanqi looked at Zhang Yi with some surprise, her eyes filled with doubt. How do you know all this? Mr. Yamada was a well-known philanthropist. But soon she changed her tone, you know that he was such a kind-hearted person, but you still did such evil things to him, showing that you are really a heartless person. I advise you to lose your way as soon as possible, apologize to Mr. Yamada, and treat him. Su Nuanqi covered her face with one hand and stubbornly pointed at Zhang Yi with the other, like a righteous fighter. Zhang Yi glanced at her coldly and chided, what the hell do you know? This sound scared Su Nuanqi back several steps. Zhang Yi continued leisurely, Yamada Masanami, I seem to remember that you had a Huashu Kingdom name, Lu Jingnan. I thought that name sounded familiar when I first heard it. 5 years ago, you established the Wayman Foods Corporation in Tianhai City, and your main food was prepared dishes. At first, your name was Lu Jingnan, and because you spoke fluent Mandarin, no one knew that you were actually Neon, and your real name was Yamada Masanami. Your company's main business was pre-prepared food. Through various channels, you get ingredients from overseas that don't meet food safety standards, and manufacture food for the market. Zhang Yi slowly talked about Yamada Masanami's past while pacing. Yamada Masanami's face, on the other hand, was gradually turning pale. In the middle of the crowd, entrepreneur Ma Wenjin couldn't help but frown as he heard these words, as if he had thought of something. Zhang Yi continued, in the year 2047, which was roughly 4 years ago, you bought connections to allow your food company's food to enter the campuses of multiple cities in Jiangnan. Later, Because of a food poisoning incident, your company's food safety problems were exposed. People found out that the ingredients your company used that claimed to be high-grade imported ingredients turned out to be junk ingredients that other countries didn't want, or even expired ingredients. By the time people found out, you quickly struck gold, transferred the company, and fled back to Neon. In that wave, you made at least a few $1 billion, right? Or tens of billions. I'm sorry, but I'm just a small warehouse manager who doesn't know much about these doors. Since I work very close to your warehouse, I've always known what kind of stuff your company was producing. The employees of your warehouse told me personally that even if they took those things and fed them to the pigs, they were afraid that it would affect the health of the pigs, and they even never ate it. Zhang Yi glanced down at him, his eyes disgusted as if he was looking at a dirty, stinking pig. Letting those teenagers eat your company's shoddy food damaged their health and even hospitalized due to food poisoning. Does your conscience hurt? I don't really think you have a conscience. It's just that, huh? Zhang Yi intentionally raised his decibel and said loudly, those that were damaged were the physical health of the children of Washu Kingdom, so what does it have to do with you, the Neon President? Yamada Masanami's body trembled like a sieve, shaking violently. The others around them finally realized why Zhang Yi had to lay such a harsh hand on Yamada Masanami as soon as he saw him. This kind of person really deserves to die. I remember, when the news was reporting about the food safety problems in Jiangnan, it turned out to be this dog's doing. A woman excitedly ran over and kicked at Yamada Masanami. So the culprit was actually you. My son got food poisoning from eating the food provided by your company. That was a high-class private school, and it was all infiltrated by you. Go to hell, go to hell. Bastard. Now, no one in the crowd at the scene dared to stand up in Yamada Masanami's defense anymore. You even pretended to be a good person to deceive us. Fortunately, our wise captain saw through your disguise and broke down your clumsy lies. Dirty, lowly bedbug, use your life to give thanks to those poor children you've brutalized. Yamada Masanami raised his head and cried out in defense, I deserve to die, I am not human. But I was forced into this business. Even if I don't do it, there are others who do. And what I earned was only the small end, the big end was taken by your own people. Please, give me a way out. I've reformed, I pray to Buddha every day, and I've sponsored a number of orphanages and homes for the elderly. Yamada Masanami's supplicating gaze looked at everyone, and everyone shied away. This kind of person was, indeed, deserving of death. Yamada Masanami's heart went cold. Suddenly he thought of Tsunuanchi, that incomparably kind little girl. So he crawled to Tsunuanchi's feet, hugged her legs and cried out, Miss Su, but I've always treated you like my daughter. You know, my daughter died young, and from the first time I saw you, I've treated you like my daughter. Chapter 829 Ocean Turtle Milk. Tsunuanchi couldn't bear it in her heart. She remembered how good Yamada Masanami treated her on Rockflow Island. Because he was afraid that she would starve, he would prioritize her with any quality protein. So Tsunuanchi blocked in front of Yamada Masanami, her eyes staring at Zhang Yi, and said, anyone can make mistakes, but there is no greater good than to be able to change after making a mistake. Why can't we give him a chance? He is a very kind person right now. You can't easily deprive him of his life. Zhang Yi looked at her with the eyes of a brainwashed person. You are sick, aren't you? The fact that a sanctimonious heart could go to such an extent had already reached the point of being disgusting. I was not joking with you. Tsunuanchi stomped her foot in anger. She explained, this I can prove, he's really very kind. When we were on Rockflow Island, in the beginning, we often went hungry and couldn't eat. He would sneak off to find a seafarer and milk the turtle milk for me to drink. I had a low body temperature, so he held me in his arms at night to help me sleep and keep me warm. Such a person, do you guys think he was a bad person? Tsunuanchi's big eyes looked at the crowd with a determined expression, making it clear that she was not joking. She was very seriously convinced that Yamada Masanami was a good person. As Zhang Yi listened, he suddenly felt something odd. What the hell was turtle milk? Huh, does this sea turtle thing have milk? Shokir frowned. Whales do have milk, but sea turtles are egg-bearing animals, so they shouldn't have any. Old Tian replied with certainty, where does that thing have milk? Sunuanchi blinked, hummed, and said triumphantly, you guys have shallow knowledge here, don't you? There's an oceanic sea turtle that was using milk to nurse its offspring. She looked at Li Zhongyu, Mr. Li, weren't you a sea turtle catcher? You tell him, do sea turtles have milk? Li Zhongyu's face was a bit ugly. The matter of the sea turtles was a secret he didn't want to mention anymore. Zhu Lark couldn't look away. Lisa, sea turtles are milkless, no sea turtle in this world can produce milk. Sunuanchi got angry, I really drank it. Zhang Yi frowned at first, but then, he suddenly figured something out. I know what she was drinking. Next to him, Zhou Qir's gaze became odd. It couldn't be that, could it? But the odor is so obvious, can it really be detected? Heating it up might have a strange effect. Besides, she was starving and wanted to eat everything. But that was really high in protein too. The eyes of the surrounding crowd all changed at once, looking at Yamada Masanami with eyes full of disgust, especially the women looking at him more like they were looking at trash. The perversity of neon people was evident. Sunuanchi was still unsure, and said smugly, you should all learn more about biology, there really is turtle milk. Zhang Yi had a bad smile on his face, but in front of so many people, especially so many female compatriots, he was not willing to break it down. Anyway, everyone already knew about this matter, and Sunuanchi would naturally figure it out afterward. Since things have been figured out, let's throw him into the sea. Yamada Masanami's eyes widened in fear as he roared in horror, you can't do this to me, I don't want to die, I want to live. Li Sang, you promised to bring me back to land, save me. Miss Su, I was the one who loved you the most, you can't watch me die. Zhang Yi waved his hand, it's not good for anyone to speak now. Stop, I forbid you to do this. Sunuanchi opened her arms and surprisingly blocked in front of the two crew members. You people, why can't you speak up? You should learn to fraternize a bit instead of just knowing how to solve everything with violence. Zhang Yi finally became impatient. A woman with a stupid brain, even if you were not willing to take care of her, she would still get the better of you and come over to pester you. What a joke, to come over to protect a second-hand dealer who makes poisonous food to victimize children. Fine, if you're so protective of him, then from now on, I'll just give you that kind of food from their company every day. In his heterospace, there was still a portion of the food that he had collected from the major shopping malls and supermarkets in the beginning. The quality had long been not too good, Zhang Yi couldn't throw it away, and had planned to be kind and give relief to the victims one day. Now encountered a head of iron, back to take out, thrown in the corner of the kitchen for a few nights, naturally soaked hair. The kitchen is warm and humid, very suitable for microorganisms to survive. Sunuanchi clenched her teeth, she actually mustered up the courage to say, as long as you don't hurt Mr. Yamada, I'll eat those things, so what? It's not like it's going to kill anyone anyway. Zhang Yi said, there are some things that was not eaten to death, but... Well, isn't your biology very good? Then do you understand that eating any protein is somewhat different from eating people? Sunuanchi frowned and pondered for a moment, then smugly replied, oh, this kind of question also wants to be used to embarrass me? Of course it was germ cells. Among the surrounding crowd, there were people who couldn't help but cover their mouths with their hands and burst out laughing. They were holding back their laughter, but they didn't dare to let it out because the occasion was so serious. This made Sunuanchi feel puzzled. What are you guys laughing at? Was it a lack of common sense in biology? Zhu Lark couldn't hold back any longer at this time. She was really sick of stupidity and couldn't look straight at this dull goose continuing to make a fool of herself. Say less. Sunuanchi begged, sister, you must help me. Zhu Lark came to her ear and said with some difficulty, the turtle milk you ate before was actually... The deck suddenly became quiet. There was only Zhu Lark's whispering in Sunuanchi's ear, as well as her gradually becoming stunned, numb, and dumbfounded. After listening to Zhu Lark's words, the corners of her eyes twitched. Then mechanically turned her head to look at Zhu Lark. Alice, you. You must be joking with me, right? Really, it's too outrageous, how could I possibly believe it? Zhu Lark cast her a sad expression. Su Nuanqi's pupils shrunk violently, then rushed to a woman next to her like a madman, shaking her shoulder and shouting, "This must be a fake, right? There really is oceanic turtle milk, right? She was sure again and again, but the woman didn't give her the answer she wanted. Maybe that was bird eggs too. Yes, seabird's egg fluid. The woman explained haphazardly and helplessly. But these words didn't hold water at all. At that temperature, the bird's egg would freeze in less than a moment. Bayamo couldn't help but walk over and said, "Think on the bright side, Ms. Lisa, at the very least. That's still very nutritious, right?" Su Nuanqi couldn't fool herself anymore. She saw the eyes of everyone around her filled with mockery. "Don't!" She screamed, covered her face and rushed into the cabin. Zhang Yi shrugged. "I think the foreigner has a point, at least he's just making you eat it." Chapter 830, After all, I'm not a demon either. Su Nuanqi was directly screwed out of her defense by Yamada Masanami's tactics. Li Zongyu shook his head helplessly. When he was on the island, he had detected Yamada Masanami making moves on many of the women in the regiment. It was just that he was just an old man in his 50s or 60s, and didn't have the kind of guts to actually do anything about it. So he was only able to secretly poke around with some dirty tricks to fulfill his perverted desires. Zhou Keir covered her mouth and retched a bit as she looked at that neon old pervert with disgust. Zhang Yi, however, did not think so. People would eat anything when they were starving. He had even seen a neighbor eating his own excrement when he was in the Yuelu neighborhood before. When a person is hungry to the extreme, there is no sense of propriety, righteousness, integrity and shame, and the dark side of the heart will be completely unleashed, which is even more perverted and scary than a wild animal. Zhang Yi signaled the two crew members to take action. The two men immediately picked up Yamada Masanami, who was like a dead dog, and dragged him towards the railing. This time, no matter how much Yamada Masanami cried in pain and begged for forgiveness and shit, no one sympathized with him one bit more. It was only in the Rock Flow group that Bayamo and the others who had surrounded this scene were greatly shocked in their hearts. Baimo's face was pale and his body trembled. Through Yamada Masanami, it was as if he saw his own miserable appearance of being thrown into the sea and then frozen into ice. For a moment, he actually vertigoed with fear. Don't, let me go." Yamada Masanami's pleas for mercy were useless as he was thrown down from a height of several dozen meters. All that could be heard was a miserable scream, and if anything, the sound of splashing water. The old pervert flailed in the water for less than a few seconds before he was frozen into a lump of ice by the tens of degrees below zero seawater. Cha Haicheng walked to the edge of the ship's side and loudly cursed Yamada Masanami. "This lowly thing deserves to die. Long live Mr. Zhang. You were the messenger of justice, thank you so much for discovering this filthy rat turd for us. I, Cha Haicheng, swear here that I will unconditionally obey any of your orders." Cha Haicheng frantically knelt down to Zhang Yi. Not literally, he directly knelt down in front of Zhang Yi and then went to kiss the top of Zhang Yi's feet. Zhang Yi frowned and immediately took a few steps back. "My shoes are expensive, what do you want?" "Ah, it was my fault, I shouldn't have defiled your precious shoes with my dirty saliva." Cha Haicheng knelt on the ground and apologized with incomparable devotion. Anyone could see that Cha Haicheng was truly scared. He was wagging his tail and begging for mercy, praying in this way to get Zhang Yi's mercy and avoid becoming the second Yamada Masanami. Because Cha Haicheng himself was no good. The things he had done in Silla were more than dozens of times more disgusting than the district merchant Yamada Masanami. Zhang Yi detested this kind of person. But one had to admit that there were times when this kind of trash was useful. He smiled and lowered his head, his gaze shifting slightly upwards, skimming over the bodies of everyone on board. This caused those passengers to involuntarily cower their bodies, feeling as if a sword was slashing through them. "If you want to show your loyalty to me, then prove it to me with facts. You tell me, is there any other trash on the ship? Especially the neon, find them all for me. Cha Haicheng sniffed, and his eyes instantly became fierce. I know there are 2 more neons there. He got up from the ground and viciously rushed towards the crowd. At once, a woman and a youth ran backwards in fear. Cha Haicheng grabbed the woman and said to Zhang Yi invitingly, she was Yamada Masanami's ex-wife, and she wasn't a good thing to come here. The woman pleaded, he and I divorced 3 years ago, and I immigrated there, he has nothing to do with me anymore. The other youth was also grabbed by the crew and twisted in front of Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi glanced at the woman and didn't say anything, instead, he landed his gaze on the panicked youth. What's the name? That youth shivered and opened his mouth. This opening was indeed permeated with a neon flavor. Zhang Yi remembered that when he was present, this guy had never opened his mouth to speak. It's none of my business, I've never harmed anyone from Washu Kingdom. It has nothing to do with me. Zhu Lark walked over quickly. Zhang Yi, that's enough. Enough was it? Zhang Yi looked at her and asked rhetorically. Zhu Lark was a little bit furious by Zhang Yi's eyes, and for a moment, she surprisingly didn't know how she should reply. Zhang Yi laughed. Old Tian came over and asked Zhang Yi what to do with them. Old Tian's eyes were asking Zhang Yi if he wanted to make a move and beat them up first. Zhang Yi, however, said, forget it, I'm not a devil. He looked at the woman and the youth and said lightly, don't worry, I won't kill you. I, Zhang Yi, am not an unreasonable executioner. The 2 were relieved in their hearts and thanked him. Zhang Yi, however, said, only, while I won't kill you, I have no reason to save you. When I realized that this ship of mine would save the lives of 2 neon people, I felt twisted from the bottom of my heart. Unfortunately, I'm too kind-hearted to lay my hands on ordinary people again. He reached out and pointed at the 2 men in front of him. So, I won't kill you guys. I can send you a lifeboat, so get off and leave. If you're lucky, probably after drifting along the ocean currents for half a year, you'll be able to encounter land. The faces of the women and youths who originally had some hope suddenly changed. How is this any different from letting them die? Not to mention on the ocean, even if they encountered an island, they wouldn't be able to survive for long. As long as they left the Gold Ant front, it was a certain death. The duo begged bitterly. The other passengers were also very speechless by Zhang Yi's maneuver. Xia Yunfan whispered, what's the point of pretending to be a good guy, wasn't this just killing people? It's still superfluous. Everyone else was of a similar mindset, thinking that Zhang Yi was being and standing again. Zhu Lark, on the other hand, was straightforward with his thoughts. Aren't you still sending them to their deaths this way? Zhang Yi nodded, it was, or what did you think? You. Zhu Lark and the rest of them were a whole big speechless. Zhang Yi said, why must people do things with meaning, is it possible that it's just to make themselves happy? He Zhang Yi life to do things, why need to explain to others? Not killing these 2 neon people with his own hands was because he didn't love to strike out at people who didn't mess with him. But he wouldn't save these 2 people either. So this matter was left to the heavens to decide, it was as simple as that. And what did the death or life of the 2 have to do with him, Zhang Yi? It wasn't like he was the father of these 2 people. They should be grateful to me because there is still a 1 in a billion chance that Drift will survive. Rely on them and I'll really do something about it. Cha Haicheng's excited voice rang out from the side. He raised his hands high and shouted, long live Mr. Zhang. You're so gentle with both of these neon people, you're really a rare good person in the world, you're simply a godlike character.